So, what's the date today? It's the 25th of January, and this is our fourth episode of Meat and Jew Season. And for those of you who have listened to the previous ones, we have been talking a lot about the American election and what that means. And I don't think we can fully understand it unless we have an historical background. So that's what I want to talk about. I want to go way back into history and look at some things that are working out today. You see, the present that we are living in is simply an amalgamation, a conglomeration of everything that has gone on in the past. And we are seeing these things that have gone on in the past coming to fruition. So before we start, let's have a word of prayer. Our loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we can spend together, delving into the mysteries of our present time and some mysteries that have gone on in the past and how they affect each other. So we ask for the presence of your Holy Spirit, and may you give us ears to hear and words to speak. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. So I want to go all the way back to the year 1773. That is when the Pope suppressed the Jesuits. But I want to go even further back than that. I want to talk a little bit about why he suppressed the Jesuits. And he suppressed the Jesuits because the Catholic, not the Protestant, the Catholic kings of Europe put pressure on him to do so. And he put pressure on him to do so because they were causing so much trouble in their territories. We know a lot about the Jesuits, and it's because of these kings and what they did back then. I'll give you an example. The Jesuits got involved with a court case in France that they thought they could win, but it went all the way to the Parliament of the French Parliament, and the French Parliament demanded that the Jesuits hand over all their documents to be examined. And when they examined them, they were shocked, and so they published them, and the whole nation was shocked. And so the king abolished them, or didn't abolish them. He kicked them out of his territory. And this is happening now all over Europe. I'll just tell you how the King of Spain did it. You got to remember, at this time, the king or the Spanish Empire was all over the world. Most of South America, most of Central America, Philippines, bits and pieces all over the world. And so he sent a letter to all his governors, and inside that letter was another letter. And the first instructions were, you must only open this second letter at a certain date at a certain time, punishable by death if you disobey me. And when that time came, all the governors all over the Spanish Empire opened this letter, and it said, arrest every Jesuit, put them on ships, and send them back to Italy, on pain of death if you let any one of them go. If you fail to accomplish this assignment, you're subject to death. So this is a very serious operation. Now, when these Jesuits arrived in Italy from the getting kicked out of the Spanish Empire, the ports in Italy wouldn't let them land. They actually fired upon these Spanish ships, saying, we don't want them. We don't want those Jesuits. So most of them ended up disembarking on the island of Corsica. And so you have this island now infested with Jesuits. Now, what is Corsica famous for? What is the most famous thing that ever happened to Corsica? That's where Napoleon came from. So do you think he was influenced by these Jesuits? Well, we'll see. So the first pope who tried to suppress the Jesuits. His name was Clement the 13th. He was assassinated. So the next pope, they're all under pressure from all the kings of Europe, all the Catholic kings, not the Protestants, all the Catholic kings. And the reason why they're putting so much pressure on them is that they've suffered so much at the hands of the Jesuits. And they're actually saying to the Pope, unless you do something about this, we are going to kick the Catholic Church out of our territories, or they're going to suppress it or place restrictions upon it. So the Pope really had no choice. So the next Pope, Clement the 14th, he suppressed the Jesuits. And when he signed it, he said, I've just signed my death warrant. Sure enough, within a few months, he was dead. He was poisoned with the most horrendous poison, a long-lasting, lingering poison that took him about a couple of months to die or something. So the Jesuits are now suppressed. Now we have to turn our attention to the state of Bavaria in Germany. This was a separate kingdom at this time. And in the Encyclopedia Britannica, it says that at this time, Bavaria was a Jesuit stronghold. And in this university called Ingolstadt, which is a Jesuit university, there is a man by the name of Adam Weishaupt, and he is the professor in charge of teaching canon law, which means Catholic canon law. And so, do you think he was a Jesuit? Of course he was a Jesuit. But this is the man that everybody knows, who has ever studied the Illuminati knows that he was the one who started the cult of the Illuminati. Now, all the Catholics say, oh yeah, yes, he was the teacher of this Jesuit university in this Jesuit state, but he hated the Jesuits. But it's just a cover story. He was a Jesuit. And the purpose of the Illuminati was to take over Freemasonry. They infiltrated the top echelons of Freemasonry and they took them over. So I just want to talk briefly now about Freemasonry. Freemasonry goes back to the Templars, the Knights Templars. Now, some of you may know the history of the Knights Templars. They were an extremely powerful and rich Catholic order who had sort of lost their focus a little bit because they had participated for more than 100 years in the Crusades, and the Crusades were now over. So they were twiddling their thumbs with not a lot to do, getting up to mischief probably. So anyway, the king, they were very rich. They had become the first international bankers that ever existed. You could deposit money into a temple in Paris, for example, and you could withdraw that money when you went to Jerusalem. You didn't have to carry the money to Jerusalem. They were the first international bankers, and they were extremely rich. And the King of France was very poor, so he decided he was going to suppress the Templars and take their money. He not only suppressed them, he burnt some of them at the stake, but he never got the money. Somehow the Templars, I don't know how, maybe they had an informer in the court or something. Anyway, they found that they must have known this was going to happen. So when the king went into the temple, the Templars' temple in Paris, he found no money. And strangely, but not strangely, the Templars had a navy on the coast of France, and the navy disappeared and they were never seen again. Nobody knows where they went, but pretty much certainly all the treasure of the Templars were on those ships and they disappeared. Now, where did they go? Well, most people think that, nobody knows where the navy went, but we do know where some of the Templars went, many of them. They went to Scotland. Now, they went to Scotland because, oh, by the way, the Pope participated in the suppression of the Jesuits, probably under pressure from the French king, but he did. And they were supposed to be his frontline troops. They were the SAS of the time. They were the elite warriors for the Catholic Church. So the Pope participated, but when they went to Scotland, because this is the time of Robert the Bruce, first king of Scotland, or a king of Scotland rather, and they went there because Robert the Bruce was offside with the Pope, and the Pope had excommunicated him. So he was very keen to have these warrior monks in his realm because he was at war with England. Now, if you know your Scottish history, maybe you don't. Anyway, the Battle of Bannockburn was where the Scots obtained their independence from England. And if every historian who writes about the Battle of Bannockburn talks about the time when the English soldiers turned and fled, and they never can explain exactly why. But some people, and I agree with them, they say that the Templars turned up with all their banners flying, and these warrior monks came into the battle on the side of Robert the Bruce, and that's why they fled, because these guys were notorious for being the best soldiers that were ever there at that time. And they obtained independence for Scotland. They now settle down in Scotland, and they establish Freemasonry there. The Templars were known for secrecy and strange rites, and which they learned from other people in the Middle East when they were down there. So anyway, they established Freemasonry. Now, a couple of hundred years later, James VI of Scotland becomes James I of England. He unites the two kingdoms together. He is the king who started the King James Bible, or he was the one who gave permission to research and establish the Bible, create that Bible. So anyway, he gave his name to it. The King James Bible is named after this king who came from Scotland. But when he came from Scotland, Freemasonry came with him, and Freemasonry was established in England, and Freemasonry spread to Europe from there and to the whole world. Now, now we have the Jesuits who are taking over Freemasonry, and they both have the same history with the King of France and the Pope. When the leader of the Templars was burnt at the stake by the king, he cursed the Pope. He was dying. He cursed the Pope and the king, and he said vengeance would come upon them. So you see, you have the Jesuits who have grievances with the King of France. You have grievances with the king of with the Pope, and the same with the Templars, who have now established Freemasonry. So what happens next is you have a courier going from Illuminati headquarters in Bavaria to France, and he's carrying instructions to the Freemasons in France about carrying out the French Revolution. This is how they're going to get their revenge. And while he's traveling through a town called Ratisbonne in Germany, which is now Regensburg, he was struck by lightning, and the courier information that he was carrying is handed to the Bavarian police. The Bavarian police are shocked about what they read, and they raid the Illuminati headquarters, or the leaders of the movement. They're even more shocked at what they find there, and they publish these documents, and they write to all the kings of Europe at the time that there is this secret group, this Illuminati group, are planning a revolution in France, and nobody believes them. It's pretty much the same today, actually. Nobody believes it. So anyway, long story short, the revolution goes ahead. The monarchy is destroyed, and I want you to show us our first picture, because this is a book which is the Freemasons' Bible, and it's called Morals and Dogma, and it is written by a man by the name of Albert Pike. I have a copy of this book, and it's a fascinating book. It's full of great secrets. And show us the next page, the next one, please. This is going to show you the inside cover. I have a copy of this book myself. You might be able to read where it says there, prepared for the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree. So that's the top echelon of Freemasonry. There's supposedly no more degrees or after the 33rd degree. These are the elite in the Freemasonry movement, and this book is just for them. Nobody else is supposed to read it. I'll tell you why. For one reason, it says in this book that they deliberately deceive the lower orders. The top order deliberately deceives the lower order. And that is just so typical of Satan's kingdom, because it's all based on deception. Now, just because it says it's only for the 33rd degree and I have a copy of it, it doesn't mean to say that I'm a 33rd degree member of Freemasonry, okay? But the reason why this book is so interesting for us is that in this book, he says something else that is fascinating for Adventists. He says, when the French monarchy was destroyed by the French Revolution, half the work was done. Now the armies of the temple are going to concentrate all their efforts on the papacy. These are the ones, through their control of the French Revolution, these are the guys who, and the Jesuits working together, they're all in the same effort here. They're going to give the Pope his deadly wound, which is so important to Adventist theology and prophecy. So they do that. They take the Pope captive, and he dies in France. They elect another one, and he is also taken captive to France, and he's not allowed to leave France. He's under the control of Napoleon. Now, as you know, the French Revolution cut the heads off many people, especially the elite. Do you think that made the rest of Europe concerned, the elite, for their own heads? Of course it did. So when Napoleon was finally put down, when he was finally defeated, they got together, next slide please, they got together at a Congress in Vienna. And the purpose of this Congress was to organize the world so that this kind of thing would never happen again. That they would never be, that the common people would never be able to threaten the elite again. That they were going to control the world, and they were going to organize the world so that something like the French Revolution can never happen again. So, in other words, their whole purpose is to control the people. And why do we think we have Kissinger? You recognize that man in the corner there? That's Henry Kissinger. The reason why we have him there, next slide please, is because Henry Kissinger loves the Congress of Vienna. He wrote his first book about the Congress of Vienna. He is an agent for whatever the Congress Vienna originally started. Henry Kissinger is an agent. He is one of the, there's a lot of talk at the moment in the media about traitors in America, and he is definitely one of them. He's one of the most influential traitors that's ever walked the halls of Congress. He has been the close advisor to Nixon, and he's been working with all the presidents since Nixon, giving them Congress of Vienna type advice. So what the Congress of Vienna identified, of course, was the greatest threat to their control of the world and of the population is the United States of America. And they have been working ever since this time to destroy the United States of America. And that's why we need to have some of this background, because we will never understand what is happening at the moment unless we have this background. So, did the Americans realize that they were in trouble? Yes, they did. Next slide, please. They knew, the Americans that lived at this time, they were much, much wiser and well informed. In spite of all our information, our internet and everything else, they were much more informed about the world than what Americans are today. So they passed what they call the Monroe Doctrine, but named after the president of that time, in 1823. And basically they said, you Europeans, you stay on your side of the Atlantic and we will stay on ours. If you come over this side of the Atlantic where we are, it will be war. That's what the Monroe Doctrine said. They were trying to keep these Congress of Vienna people out of the whole Western Hemisphere, because they knew what they were up to. And they were trying to keep the Jesuits out too, as well, of course. So were they successful? They were successful for a long time, because these Congress of Vienna type people, they were actually busy putting down revolts in their own countries. The most famous one was 1848, when a revolution broke out all over Europe. And where did they get their inspiration from? From America. People looked at America and they saw these people living free, and they wanted the same. So they put pressure on their own governments. And you know what? These governments had to make some reforms. At the bicentennial of America, there was an article in one of their magazines where it said that, and of all the countries in the world, 170 have adopted some kind of form of the American Constitution. So you see, these Congress of Vienna types, they were actually losing the battle. The American ideas of republicanism and democracy were spreading all over the world. So they had to do something. If they were going to win this battle, right? And it is a battle. Americans have to realize this. They're in an incredible war, and they're about to lose it. Anyway, so what happens next? Well, the next thing that happened is the Civil War in America. And as you know, Lincoln was the president, and the southern states seceded from the Union, so the war started, and the British and the French thought, now's our chance. So they laid their plans, and what they were going to do was this. First of all, the French went into Mexico and took over Mexico. Yes. The French invaded Mexico and took it over. And their intention was to continue on up into the war on the side of the Confederates. The British were going to invade from Canada. And they were going to put a stop to this uppity nation. And what they wanted the nation to be divided. I'm talking about America, so that then the Americans would fight against each other forever. That was their intention. So how did Lincoln respond? Well, he did two things. First of all, he freed the slaves. Lincoln never intended to free the slaves until the Civil War was over, but he freed the slaves because he knew about this threat from France and Britain. And what that did was it put pressure on both France and Britain, because slavery was a huge issue at this time, and the British Empire had just freed their slaves after an enormous amount of pressure. Some of you may have seen that film, Amazing Grace, I think it's called. Anyway, so This made it extremely difficult. In fact, the Encyclopedia Britannica said it was impossible now for them to invade, because the public in both France and Britain would have been totally against it. The second thing he to make sure that Lincoln did was he sent a letter to the Tsar of Russia. And can you put up that picture, please? That's the next one. He sent a picture to the Tsar of Russia, and this is a cartoon in a British magazine called Punch, making fun of these two working together. But so when the ambassador from America came to the Tsar bringing this letter from Lincoln, you know what the Tsar said to him? He said, "Whatever is in that letter, I allow. I will grant it. Whatever Lincoln wants from me, I will give him." And so basically Lincoln was asking for military assistance. And so what the Tsar did, he sent his navy. He sent one navy to the east coast of America and one to the west coast. By the way, you never taught this stuff in school, by the way. But it's true. And both France and Britain had just fought a war with Russia, the Crimean War, in which resulted in a stalemate. Nobody really won that war. So they weren't looking forward to another war with Russia. So they actually folded up their plans and went home. And Lincoln saved the Union. He saved the Union by those two things: declaring emancipation for the slaves and asking the Tsar for help, which is very ironic because, the United States of America was saved by Russia. You know the relationship they have at the moment. Anyway, so the next thing there are many things that we could talk about, but the major one is the bankers' plot. Can you bring up the next? No, not that one. The bankers' plot is. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go back to that one. We haven't. Oh my goodness. Go back to the other picture. Yeah, we need to talk about this. No. Next, the other one. Yes. This is a man called John Surratt. He was part of the plot that assassinated Lincoln. As you know, by the way, the whole Civil War was a very Catholic thing. I'll just give you another example. When the Pope indicated that he was supporting the South, he wrote a letter to the president of the Southern states, the Confederate States, indicating that he supported the South. 104,000 Catholics left the North and went to fight for the South. Many of them in the army. They deserted from the Northern Army and went down to the South. This was very much a religious war as well. And so when the war was finally won by the Union and the Catholics lost, what do? They get together in a Catholic home and organize a plot. This guy was one of them. He is the only one who survived the plot. He escaped, and he went to Canada first, then he went to England. Finally, he went to Vatican, and he joined the Pope's army. That's him in. The Pope had the Papal States then, and he had his own army. This is John Surratt, an American conspirator to assassinate President Lincoln, and he's sitting there in a papal army. America eventually got him back to America. He was put on trial, and he was acquitted. It's not a new thing to have corrupt courts in America. Yeah. Anyway, so that was. I just wanted to explain that the Catholics and the Jesuits, especially the Jesuits, are very much involved. I'll have to tell you another. Have you heard of Charles Chiniquy? Charles Chiniquy was a Catholic priest. he was set upon by the Jesuits. They framed him for some crime or another. So he needed a good lawyer to defend himself in court. Guess who defended him? Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer. And so they became very good friends. And Charles Chiniquy would come and visit him when he was president. And they would talk about many things Catholic. And Charles Chiniquy wrote a book called 50 Years in the Church of Rome. And in that book, he says, I come boldly before the American people to tell them that the Jesuits and the priests of Rome assassinated Abraham Lincoln. So that's another episode of the Congress of Vienna working with the Jesuits and the Catholic Church and Freemasonry trying to destroy America. And they didn't succeed. So we'd have to rush through this. So let's go to the next picture. I think, is it? Yes. The next thing they try a coup in the 1930s. And this is very much led by the bankers of New York and associated people. And they went to a general by the name of General Smedley Butler, who was an American military hero. He was the commander of the American forces in the First World War. And he was a very popular man. And so they wanted him to lead the plot. They wanted him to lead a small army to take over Washington, D.C. But here in the New York Times, it tells you that he made it public. He actually went to the Congress and he told the Congress all about the plot. You never read much about this in history books either. So the plot never happened. The coup never happened. And he named all the people who were trying to overthrow the US government, but not one of them went to jail. There was never any prosecution. They were too. It's a bit like they tell us that the banks are too big to fail, right? Well, apparently these men were too big to jail. Yeah, they were very powerful people. So, this is how things work, and they're all, they're Freemasonry and Jesuits. They all on the inside pulling strings, and so none of them went to jail. So let's now talk briefly about JFK. The assassination of JFK was another coup. This time it was successful. JFK upset absolutely everybody. He was against the Vietnam War. He was against the Federal Reserve. He was against taking over Cuba. And they just hated him. And so they eventually did away with him. There was no such thing as a lone gunman. There's never a lone gunman in these assassinations. That's proven by the fact that the actual, the official narrative of JFK's assassination is just a load of nonsense. And so the Congress itself in the 1970s, they actually took up the issue again, and they conducted an investigation against enormous opposition. But they eventually issued a statement where they said that this was not the work of a lone gunman. Before they were shut down, they got to the point where they could officially say there was no lone gunman. There was more than one gunman. More than one gunman means a conspiracy. Soon, around that time, about 100 people who were sort of involved in the whole thing, they all suffered inexplicable deaths. At least 100 people, suspicious deaths. Robert Kennedy, JFK's brother, he ran for the presidency, and he was determined. he was a bit foolish. He said publicly, I'm going to find out what really happened and punish the perpetrators. So he was assassinated. And, JFK's son eventually grew up, John Jr., they called him. And he had the same objective. I don't know whether you remember, he won everybody's hearts at JFK's funeral when he was standing like this, saluting the little boy. He was only about 4 years old or something, and he was saluting his father. Anyway, he mysteriously died in a small plane crash. See, anybody who threatens the Jesuits, Freemasons, the establishment, we call them what you want. They have their ways of dealing with these threats. So let's carry on now to 9/11. So can you put that picture up now? Oh, sorry. Here we go. This is General Smedley. He after his experience with the plot, he wrote a book called War is a Racket. He finally had this aha moment. I don't know whether you have aha moments where you finally, you have all these dots, these data points roaming around in your head, and suddenly you connect them all, and you see the big picture. And this is the most decorated U.S. Marine in Marine history, and he wrote a book about his past. And he says war is a racket, and he says in this book, I'm just a mafia hitman for Wall Street. It's quite an incredible book. It's amazing it's still available. Anyway, let's carry on to 9/11. And this, of course, is what they call the new Pearl Harbor. Where the Japanese suddenly attacked Pearl Harbor. That ushered America into the Second World War. Well, this ushered America, of course, into the war on terror. But it's also a war on terror on the American people. Can we have the next slide, please? This is a cartoon which expresses a very fundamental truth. Because when those towers got knocked over, the Bill of Rights got knocked over as well. This is the Constitution of the Americans. The Constitution got attacked as well. Here's the Patriot Act flying straight into the towers and knocking them down. And so now you see 9/11 is used as an excuse to take away the liberties of the American people and the liberties of the world, if we really think about it. Benjamin Franklin said, anybody who is willing to give up their liberty for security does not deserve either one of them. Because the founding fathers were all about liberty. They knew that the foundation of their republic was based on liberty. It's the beacon, it's the light of the world. But you see these Congress of Vienna types, these Jesuits and Freemasons. That's not what they're about. They don't like the Republic of America. They don't like people being free. They want to take our rights away. So the Patriot Act destroys the Bill of Rights. Can you bring up the next one? Oh, maybe it's not there. Do we have? No, sorry. Can you go back for a second? I had a picture about the what is it? The Defense Authorization Act. And that's even worse than the Patriot Act. This one is kind of designed to protect America from outside. The Defense Authorization Act, which was signed in the aftermath of 9/11 as well, is all about protecting the government from the people of America. It talks about it, people can be taken away without without any legal rights and placed in concentration camps. These kind of acts have not been used much yet, but they're there waiting to be used. Okay, so it's like I've tried to describe before. The way they work is they take a few steps forward and one step back. They pass the act where they are able to arrest ordinary Americans and take them away to a concentration camp, but they don't use it yet. So, but it's just about to be used. So now we have, this was all done under Bush. And by the way, this Defense Authorization Act has been re-signed by Obama. It's signed, I think, every year, or maybe every 2 years, I can't remember. And Bush and Trump has signed it as well, so it's still in effect. And so now we can go to Obama, please. So here we have President Obama, and he's being presented to the people, or he was at the time, like some kind of messiah. And he is going to solve everybody's problems. And this is how they introduce these people, because everybody's got problems and everybody wants them solved. So they have to dream up these people with superpowers. He's a very intelligent man. He's a Christ-like figure. He's going to fix everything. And of course, you know, his slogans were, "Yes, we can." So along comes Obama. And what does he do? Can you bring up the next one, please? Next picture. Well, it's just another one of his messiah-like status. What he does is he ruptures the military. He basically destroys the military. He purges the military. In this slide here, it says 9 fired just this year. Well, actually 300 top military people were purged by Obama during his 8 years. You see these three there, it says Benghazi beside them. You might remember the incident at Benghazi where this ambassador lost his life and some of his security team lost their lives. It was an attack by Islamic radicals. And Obama and Hillary Clinton made sure that the military did not intervene. They stood down the military. They gave instructions to the military not to intervene, not to save these people. These people were sending out cries for help, 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 help. We're getting, you know. And these cries for help went all the way to the Pentagon and to the White House, and they were told not to intervene. Well, these 3 military commanders, they were responsible for the area, and they disobeyed these orders, and they wanted to send help, and they were arrested by their second in commands. They were arrested. And so the military have been emasculated, but it's more than that. Can we bring up the next one, please? Yeah. It's up to 200 on this slide. But the next one, bring up the next one. You see what is here within the yellow lining? It says, when it says that the military were asked a question, are you prepared to fire on the American people? And if they said no, then they were removed. So what you have in the military are people who are willing to fire on their own people at the moment. And this is very important because people are saying that the last hope for America is the military. I don't think some in the military, perhaps. I think there could be, I'm sure you all know that America is a very split society. So the split would be in the military as well. But the top people in the military, I don't think they are going to be on Trump's side, because they have been, all of those, what they call patriots, have been purged under Obama. And there are people in the top echelons of the military now who are prepared to fire on their own people. So can we have the next slide, please? Now, this is a Russian defector, and his name is, it's always difficult with Russian names. His name is Yuri Bezmenov. And he was interviewed in the 1980s, and you can still find this interview on YouTube. And I'm going to read you something that he said in this interview. By the way, he came to America to warn. He's a KGB agent, officer. And he came to America, supposedly, this is the story anyway, to warn the Americans. He wanted out of the KGB system. So he's talking here about what he calls ideological subversion, or psychological warfare, which is commonly called in the military circles PSYOPs, Psy operations. So this is what he says about this is what he says was going on in America before this interview was taken in the 1980s. So he's talking about what has already happened in America and what was going on at the present in the 1980s. This is what he says: to change the perception of reality of every American this is what he's defining what a PSYOP is. And this PSYOP, or psychological warfare, is going on in America right now. And it's from his time and now. And the purpose of the PSYOP is this: to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that, in spite of their abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their communities, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process that goes very slow and divided into 4 basic stages. So, what's the first stage? He says, the first stage in this PSYOP, what I want to tell you is this. He also says that when you think of intelligence operations and things of that sort, most people think of James Bond type stuff. He says that's only maybe 15% of what the KGB does. He said the other 85% is all about PSYOPs, psychological operations. And so the first step in this PSYOP, which is being perpetrated on America, but the whole world as well, is demoralization. And he says it takes between 15 and 20 years to accomplish. And he says it's basically 3 generations of young people who go to university or go to higher education. It says they are taught Marxist Leninism with all their dreams of equality and social justice. And he says, and we're not doing it. Americans are doing it to Americans. Okay, that's the first step. Do any of you feel demoralized about recent events? Well, the next step is destabilization, and that takes 5 years. And he says the key areas are defense, destabilize a country's defense. And what did Obama just do? He purged 300 top military people. That's destabilizing the defense. By the way, Hillary Clinton was supposed to carry on with all of what Obama did. She was just the next step. And somebody interrupted their party. His name was Donald Trump. So anyway, destabilize the economy. Did the economy crash recently? 2008? Terrible. The economy is always unstable. And incidentally, what we're talking about here is simply the political side and the military side of bringing down America. There is another side, and that is the banking and finance side. And maybe we'll talk about that next time. But this is a full-pronged attack on the Republic of America. And if the Republic of America goes down, we're all going down with it. So, and foreign relations. You have to destabilize America's foreign relations with other countries. And has America done that? Of course it has. There have been coups all over the world where America has been involved. And then you have to bring it all to a crisis. These efforts, these demoralization, destabilization, comes to a crisis. Do we have a crisis at the moment? Does America have a crisis? It's not just Corona. It's America has a huge crisis. Their whole society is split, and it's like he said in his demoralization. Nobody knows what to think anymore. People don't know what is up, and people don't know what is down. They don't know who to believe. The internet is full of disinformation, and the truth is has taken a holiday. And then the last step is normalization. You offer people normalization. You offer them the solution, and the solution is socialism, communism. And the people will go for it because they're just so tired. They're just so sick of all the worry, and they're easily manipulated. And he says, this is the last chance this is the last country. He says, you can't escape to anywhere else for freedom. Anyway, he says he's offering a three-step solution. There must be a revival of very strong national effort of nationalism in the spirit of real patriotism. He says that must be revived. And then he says, we have to re-educate ourselves. He says, we got to stop and assess the situation and understand that most of what we believe to be true is false. And we have to re-educate ourselves. And I can personally attest to this. This is something that is not just happening in America. It's happening all over the world. I went to university in New Zealand for 5 years. And when you're there, whether you realize it or not at the time, you're drinking in socialism. It's in the air. You breathe it in. You're marinated in socialism. And there's always a few of who resist it, but they get absolutely ridiculed. I remember all this. And I had to after several years of leaving that pressure cooker environment, I began to realize that I really didn't know anything. I didn't understand anything. It was so confusing. And I decided that I had to abandon everything that I thought was right and start again. And the funny thing was, after I made that decision, God dropped The Great Controversy and The Desire of Ages in my lap. So that's a good place to start, by the way, if you want to be re-educated. But why not start with the Bible? Look, I'll read you a passage from the Bible here. For we wrestle not against flesh and against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Like, that's, as you probably know, that's Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. We have to take that. We have to take what the Bible says about this seriously. What about the dragon that Satan and the devil that deceives how much of the world? All the world. All the world. And what we're doing is we're battling against Satan's kingdom. It's all based on deception. It's all deception. And we're not seeing it. We're not seeing it. We're in the Laodicean condition, and we don't have the eye salve to see what's going on. So we need to re-educate ourselves. Start thinking out of the box, out of the square. Don't turn off the mainstream media. Start looking elsewhere for your information. So anyway, this is what this man was offering us. Now there's another Russian defector who has something even more interesting to say. Can you bring up the next one, please? This man, his name is Anatoly Golitsyn, and he's the author of another book called New Lies for Old. In other words, he's saying that socialism, the old socialism, is now in a new dress. And he tells a very interesting story about the Bolshevik Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution set up false opposition, not just one, but several. And this was to attract the patriots, the Russian nationalists, and assemble them where they were easily identifiable and reachable. And he talks specifically about a Russian Tsarist general who everybody thought was a Russian nationalist who supported the Tsar, but he was secretly a communist. And he started a movement for the nationalists who were opposed to the communist revolution. And he started a narrative, if you like, where he said, don't worry, it's all going to be resolved. These communists are not going to take over because we have an organization in the background that's about to pounce and turf these communists out of our country and take the country back for the Russian nationalists and the Russian patriots. Have you heard that story before recently? Any of you? Come on. Have you heard that story? Have you heard of a man called QAnon? That's exactly the same story. QAnon is telling the same story to the American patriots today. Don't worry, sit back. There is a plan. Trust the plan. Trump's going to sort it out. It's all going to plan. So don't get involved. Don't get angry. Don't grab your weapons. Don't go out in the street. Just sit back. Don't do anything. That's what QAnon has been telling the American people for about the last 2 years or so. It's the exact same plot and plan that the communists used against the Russian people. And it's very effective. So can we have the next picture? This is Anatoly Golitsyn. The West's main weakness is unchanged. It cannot grasp what it is facing. It cannot understand what it's facing. Next picture. That's his other book, New Lies for Old. Next picture. Sorry, next one. We've got two in them. Now, some people think that this is QAnon. Do you know who he is? He's got his little badge on. His name is Michael Flynn. Now, Michael Flynn has been one of the most staunch supporters of Trump that Trump has ever had. You can see him being interviewed. Trump is going to win. Trump is going to win. On the 20th of January, Trump will be inaugurated. Trump will have a fourth term. You know, the interesting thing about General Flynn is that he was appointed by Obama to the highest office of military intelligence. He was appointed by Obama. Are you getting this? He was appointed to the highest intelligence office that the military has while he was purging every other general. He put this one in place, and now he's fronting up as the staunchest supporter for Trump. That's why people think that he's QAnon. But I don't know for sure. All I know is that the American people are, and the whole world are being duped very badly. I don't know what Trump's involvement is, to be honest. Some people suspect that he's in on the deception. I still don't think that. But I do have questions, and I'm sure you do too, because did Trump know what QAnon was saying? Yes, he did. He knew. He used to acknowledge people holding up signs at his rallies, QAnon, and he would point at them and go, "Not yeah, that's good." Yeah, he wouldn't say anything, but he would acknowledge the people holding up QAnon signs. So I don't know. I just fear for the future. I don't think we're going to have a victory in this case, because prophecy tells us that the globalists and the Jesuits and the Freemasons and the popes and the Congress of Vienna type people, they take over America. They run the show in the end. So I don't think all this talk about Trump coming back and thumping them is true. I can't see it happening. Can we have the next picture? They're making Joe Biden out to be the same as what they did with Obama, with all these halos, and look at him, he's a saint. They made Obama into a saint, and now they're trying to make Joe Biden into a saint. And then you have Clinton and the two Clintons and Obama up in heaven looking down approvingly upon him. And you have political leaders worshiping him on the side there. And you have the media looking up at him, and all the people rejoicing below. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to make Joe Biden into a saint, but they're trying. One last picture. No, actually two last pictures. Joe Biden's administration has already started working on the Domestic Tourism Prevention Act of 2021. And they are going after all the Trump supporters. This is designed to put anybody who disapproves of Biden in jail. Facebook has already said that they are cooperating with the FBI to identify all Trump supporters, especially those who supposedly invaded the Congress on that, when they had this demonstration or invasion, whatever you want to call it. So this is where we're going. It's not looking good. And one last picture. You know who George Orwell is? George Orwell was the man who wrote the book 1984, where he imagined this dystopian world, which is the opposite of utopia, where everybody was controlled. And he said, if you want a vision of the future, he said, then imagine a boot stomping on your face forever. But you can make it look good. You can put a sunshine on it and a nice blue sky as it comes down on your face. That's his prediction. And he was a man who was in on some of the he was a man in the intelligence agencies, by the way. He worked for intelligence agencies in Britain. So I'm sorry, my friends, it's not a very pleasant message tonight, but I think it's probably a reasonably accurate one, because right from the very beginning, the American Republic has been under attack. And hopefully I've shown you that. And we've come to the point where it's almost all over. It's if that domestic terrorism act gets passed, they're going to go after everybody who disagrees with them. We're going to have gulags in America, like they had in Soviet Union times. It's not a pretty picture. But as you know, if you're a Seventh-day Adventist and you know your Bibles and you know your spirit of prophecy, we know that hard times are coming for all those who are believers, especially for those who are believers. And the last people they will go after is us. So, like I said, it's not a pretty picture, but I think it's an accurate one. So that's what I wanted to share with you this evening. Sorry, you're probably feeling rather depressed. I'm just feeling a little depressed myself, but you know where our true hopes lies, don't you? And we have to re-educate ourselves to get past this mess that we live in. We are strangers and sojourners in this land, and our citizenship is in heaven. So we just have to get through this and out the other side. We just have to try and negotiate it the best way we can. I never, I've read all about Ellen White talks about the time of trouble. I never thought it would involve vaccines, for example. She actually said that when we think of the time ahead, we often think it's going to be more trouble than it really is. But that's not the case with the time of trouble. She said it's going to be worse than we can ever imagine. And I think we're getting a small taste of it. So don't put your faith in Trump. Don't put your faith anywhere. Put your faith in Jesus and his soon return.